The government aims to make India's digital economy a trillion-dollar economy in the next 5 years, and the upcoming policy is expected to be in line with telecom policies across the world. The major beneficiaries, of course, will be telecom service providers themselves, but what should be on the priority list as far as policymakers concerned as we move towards a digital revolution? To talk about just that, I would like to call up on stage Senior Director, Global Public Policy, GSM Association, Dr. Manimohan. Please join me in welcoming him on stage with a warm round of applause. Dr. Manimohan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to share some of my thoughts. I just want to start with these two data points based on two reports that I have personally contributed to. So the first one looks at 2015 and looks at the proportion of online market activity in relation to the total market size across a number of sectors. And I draw two insights from it. One, across most categories, from B2C retail to advertising to gaming and publishing, we see the market size has grown due to digitalization. In other words, the pie has become bigger. The second insight is that the online proportion of market activity in relation to the total market size is significant but small. And if we fast forward to 2025 and look at a publication from Accenture and the World Economic Forum, they project that by 2025, digitalization across 5 key industries would deliver or would unlock more than $10 trillion in value for both industry and society as large. Ladies and gentlemen, the potential of digitalization is immense. And that is why many countries and big companies and small companies have a digital agenda and/or a digital strategy. They consider digital as an opportunity to pivot to new technologies, new business models, and new landscapes. I'm sure many of you would have seen the front page of The Economist this week. It says the battle for digital supremacy, and it has 2 countries on it, the US and China. Every country and every company wants to be on that front page. Let me just digress for a minute because in the opening remarks, Arun mentioned AI. Let me take China. It has more than 800 million internet users and growing. And it is just not about putting a phone in the hands of users. Hyperconnectivity provides a large data sets. And if you fast forward and think at artificial intelligence and machine learning, it is built on data. The diversity of data set for AI is very important for humanity. Without that diversity, we lose the ability of technologies to serve society at large. Ambition for digitalization is not our problem. Every country, as I say, every company has a digital agenda. The real hurdle might be your ability to catalyze your own organizations to transform to this new era. Much like in software development models, and you should know this better than anyone else, that we have moved from a waterfall model to a more agile development model. Strategy and policy formulation for the digital era also needs to be more agile, nimble, and dynamic. Building a digital economy requires a large number of enablers or pillars to be in place. Infrastructure, capital, talent, skills, mindset, leadership. And there are some barriers to realizing the opportunity we mentioned in the previous slide. Unfit regulatory frameworks, infrastructure gaps, lack of public trust in new technologies. But if we all work together, we can unlock and realize that potential we saw previously. one of the crucial pillars is a robust and high-quality connectivity infrastructure. And that's what I'm going to focus on for the rest of my talk. Today, more than half the population across the world is not digitally connected. In India, for every digitally connected citizen, there are probably 2 others who are unconnected. Demand for digital connectivity will continue to grow. We are at the cusp of many new technologies: 5G, IoT, densification, virtualization, edge computing, machine learning. All of these require a rethinking of how infrastructure is built, monetized, and how policy is developed for this next generation infrastructure. The capabilities, complexities, and costs of next generation infrastructure would be very different to the ones we have seen before. Yes, private investments under a competitive market framework supported by a conducive policy environment will drive investments in this infrastructure. But we should also recognize there are challenges. Traditionally, there have been 2 challenge zones, or if I may call infrastructure frontiers, in relation to mobile connectivity. One, dead zones. The laws of physics dictate that signal can't get into certain areas. This might be an issue for IoT signals. Rural zones or low population zones. This is all about the laws of people. The theories of economics say that it is not sustainable to build infrastructure in certain areas, given the upfront capital investment required for connectivity infrastructure. When there are some technology progression that is trying to push this frontier further, for example, MIMO and beamforming and other technologies might push this frontier further forward. I worked in a company in Silicon Valley who pioneered MIMO and beamforming more than in the early 2000s. And we see that technology being commercialized today. We also see that there will be a new third frontier that will emerge in megacities. Again, megacities is not just a problem in any other part. It's also a problem for both developed and developing world. Of the 31 megacities today, 24 are in the emerging world. The 10 cities that will join them in 2030 are all in the emerging world. By 2030, almost 30% of the world's population will live in cities of 1 million plus population. We also look at megacities because that's where the new technologies, 5G, IoT, and other use cases will begin their journey. We found that under current assumptions about revenue trends, market environment, policy frameworks, how infrastructure is built, that CapEx and OpEx for next generation mobile connectivity will be 2 to 3 times higher in different archetypes, in different megacity archetypes. So we used the model that Shell Oil developed to look at cities. So they have 2 axes, one in terms of the GDP per capita of the country, and one in terms of the density of buildings. And we found that capital intensity for operators will be 2 to 3 times higher by 2025. And these numbers have been validated by other research firms that you can find on the net. What it means is that in ultra-dense areas, more than half the demand might go unserved if we do not make some changes. So let me try to conclude on this slide. So we have a digital ambition, which all of us buy into. We have the realities of infrastructure, which is challenging. So the question is, can policy help to close and narrow this gap? India is in the middle of reviewing its national telecom policy, and we all look forward to what it would say in the next few weeks. Other countries are also reviewing this to align their telecom policy framework with their digital strategy. For example, the European Union is at the moment concluding its review of the telecom framework to align with its digital single market strategy. There are many other countries in this region, many of your neighbors who have a digital agenda are in the middle of reviewing the telecom regulations. If we put connectivity infrastructure as our main goal in the middle, we can look at it from a policy perspective with these 4 domains. I mean, this is nothing new, and if you have been to Mobile World Congress in February this year, you would have seen many people talking about these categories. And there are 4: spectrum, infrastructure, cost, and regulatory framework. And I want to draw just one highlight from each one of them. In spectrum, affordable and sufficient spectrum will reduce network costs. As we go higher and higher in our spectrum bands, it will be very difficult to build big cells. And that also has implications as to how you price spectrum. In the recent APG meeting, I should commend that India has taken the leadership in this region by signaling its interest in the millimeter wave bands below 45 gigahertz. And other countries, this week, for example, my former employer, Ofcom, is auctioning spectrum in both 2.3 and 3.4 bands, with 3.4 bands targeted towards 5G. Number two, infrastructure. Networks will get denser. Access to sites, approval of sites needs to be faster, cheaper, and easier. This is all about the ease of doing business, which is one of the requirements put forward by the mobile industry here in India. And number three, cost. Spectrum fees is one aspect, but there are many other levies, SUCs, USOF, license fees. And these are, if you compare to other countries in this region and elsewhere, at a higher level in India compared to many other markets. And they should be reviewed as part of this national telecom policy. And finally, of course, the regulatory framework, which is all about how you set the framework to govern markets. Markets are becoming broader. There are no clear, bright line rules between different segments. And how do you set your regulatory model, whether it's policy, regulations, other legal instruments, such as horizontal instruments. Matthew mentioned about the GDPR, which is a horizontal instrument to create privacy aspects, just not for telecoms, but other companies in the ecosystem in the EU. And this needs to be rethought as to how you govern this kind of converged and broader markets world. Regulation could be based on functional objectives rather than the real structure and technologies. There should be a higher threshold for ex-ante intervention in regulation. Regulatory impact assessments and cost-based analysis, consultations, these all help to set the appropriate regulation for a forward-looking basis. And I just want to finish with this concluding thought. Industry 4.0 is all about connecting and collaborating. It's moving from digitalizing products to digitalizing an entire value chain, an entire ecosystem. And if I may say, Policy 4.0 need to align with that vision. Although, from a policymaker and regulator's point of view, you need to partition your policy issue and look at different domains. It's also important to look at the cross-connect between them. And let me say what I mean by that by illustrating two recent examples. In France, earlier this year, the French government, the regulator, and the operators came together, and they agreed a political deal, which is to extend spectrum licenses for another 10 years for the operators in return for a commitment to invest in certain number of additional base station sites. And that is about spectrum, infrastructure, sector costs coming together to solve one issue. Take the United States. The FCC issued a 5G-ready wireless infrastructure order just a few weeks ago, which exempts small cells, which will be part of the next generation infrastructure, from federal historic and environmental reviews. They mentioned that a review for a small cell can cost up to $10,000 per cell, and relaxing and streamlining those requirements would help them to unlock that value to be invested in infrastructure. As the NTP comes along and we all consult and collaborate and put our inputs into it, I hope that at the output of it, there will be a framework that will allow the telecoms and digital industries in India to benefit from it and capture that opportunity we talked about in earlier. Thank you for listening to me.